Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Good morning and welcome to Out with Dan. Today I'm so excited to talk to Robert Gwaltney about his wonderful book, The Cicada Tree. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. I've been seeing all these wonderful accolades you've been getting, and I know exactly why.
Thank you. This is my debut novel. So I am, before it went out into the world, there's that moment of panic that, oh my gosh, people are actually going to read this book.
And it's like delivering a child into the world.
It is. And you want everyone to think that your child is beautiful.
Absolutely. And we know in real life, sometimes that's not the case, but you delivered a beautiful child. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Being Southern as well, I hear so much of the rhythm of the South and a sing-song voice, not necessarily a back and forth, but a continual rhythm that resonates with the earth. Is that something you set out to do?
I admire writers whose work possesses a lyrical quality. I've always been drawn to that. And it's something that I love, and it's something that I love to attempt to accomplish on the page. So it was intentional. There are music themes throughout the Cicada Tree. I listened obsessively to Moonlight Sonata throughout the writing of the book. And, within the Cicada Tree, I reference Cordelia Sonata, and who is the matriarch of the wealthy family that Annalise, the protagonist, is obsessed with. And so basically, Cordelia Sonata is Moonlight Sonata. And what I tried to do, Dan, so the Cicada Tree is in three acts, and Moonlight Sonata is in 3 movements. So I tried to pace the novel within each of those acts with the pacing of Moonlight Sonata.
I love that. And I love the lyricism of sound in your book. Sound is so ingrained from page 1 to the last page. And it is something that I'll share with you that I grew up in North Carolina, and I know what cicadas sound like, but I didn't know what they were. And so I was back in North Carolina in July, and I was reading your book, and I had, sort of studied what they were. And I realized this noise or sound I'd heard my entire childhood was cicadas. And I did not know that. But the lyricism of that simply comes through. And it's not only cicadas, but it's the appearance of lightning bugs and other things in nature that I think you just did such a great job with. Was lightning bugs something else that excited you?
Oh, yes, in a way. I mean, there's something very magical about of that throbbing light of the cicada of lightning bugs. And growing up with them, of course, they were pervasive in the South, and they're lovely. And it certainly was a wonderful literary element to be able to play with.
I liked it too, because I think that it also flows through to your characters and how we see them as lights and how we see them as sound. And that just came through so much. And the beautifulness between Miss Wessie and Mom and and Grace, and how these characters play out with such loving reverence for each other.
Was that came across on the page? Yeah. Yes. I wanted there were problems afoot, within that family. The protagonist is Annalise Newell, who's 11. Her mom is Grace, and her father's name is Claxton, and he has some drinking issues. And for the most part, at the beginning of the novel, Annalise thinks that life is pretty good with the exception of the fact that she doesn't understand this rift that's occurred between her mom and dad. And it was very important to me to be able to tell a story of women, to celebrate
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Southern women that I've known in my life. And so I did want to be very intentional and take great care when I write those women's characters, specifically the relationship that you were just speaking of. And Miss Wessie is an older Black woman who comes to live with the Newell family after Annalise's father dies, and that's not really a spoiler.
No.
We advertise early on that the father goes away, but I treated Miss Wessie, with the love and respect that I would treat and have treated my grandmothers.
I pick up on that, and I love that she brings wisdom to the table. She brings life experience to the table. There are things that we learn in life that we bring with us, and Miss Wessie brings not only life's experience but love, and it's some pure love, and she brings some sternness as well. And I recognize that in so much of the women I saw growing up, no matter of their race, they brought some wisdom to the table, and when they brought love and some sternness and discipline, that was good as well.
Exactly. All of the women in the book or the main characters and primary, secondary characters really do possess something special about them. There is some supernatural element or gift that they all possess. And Miss Wessie's, as you just said, is indeed wisdom.
Yes, I totally agree. Having grown up, sort of, I would say, in the economic realm of Annalise, maybe a little bit ahead of that, but not so far ahead of it. There were always people. Try to make sure I make this correct. So there were people who possessed gifts. There were people who knew that other people possessed gifts. And some people liked that a lot, and some people did not like that a lot. I love the fact that in the Cicada Tree, you brought characters with gifts, inherent gifts that they inherited um, from being born. And they bring these gifts with them. I love the fact that Grace could read things, and it's nice to see that celebrated in a book.
Thank you. Yeah. So Grace, who's Annalise's mother, possesses the ability to see the future in the stitches that she sews, and it's a gift that she's possessed since she was a girl.
Hmm. My mom worked in a shirt factory, and there was a woman whose arm was burned very badly. And there happened to be a fellow at this shirt factory whose gift was talking out fire. And as strange as it may seem, he came to this woman who was burned badly, and he held her arm and he talked the fire out of her. And by a few days, her arm was completely healed. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, that's all, it's all wives' tales and stuff like that. But there are people who possess gifts. And I celebrate those people. And I appreciate the fact that you celebrated those in this book as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I am a very open-minded individual, and I like to think that there are individuals who possess gifts. There are miraculous things that exist in this world that we just can't explain.
That's right. And I mean, there are people who can tell the future, can see into the past, and there are charlatans out there. There really are. And and as Ringland says, there's a fool born every day. And then I like to say there are two people to take advantage of the fool. So
I like that.
yes, I just love, of course, the fact that the book is set in the South. And I like that because that's where I'm from. I like reading about other places, but I did like that. I was struck by something that I will call electricity, that I find that too runs throughout the entire book, whether it's the people, the weather, the land. I really appreciate that. Did you grow up in a place that was very electric?
Yes, I believe that there's something unique about the climate in the South that lends itself to that electricity, that crackle that nature brings. Um, the town that the novel takes place in is fictitious. I call it Providence, Georgia, but it's probably on or around geographically where I grew up. in Cairo, Georgia, a small town in southwest Georgia in Grady County.
And I find the same thing. I remember growing up in North Carolina that before an electrical storm, the weather changes when you have an electrical storm. It often is from being very hot to cooling down, or vice versa. And that's what sort of brings electricity. But you can feel it. It is something that it's not just you hear the thunder in the distance. You can feel the electricity if you're attuned to it. And of course, that electricity gives your book such excitement because you capture that so well, and it's enjoyable.
Thank you.
Did you grow up in a clapboard house?
I did not. I did not, but I knew people who did.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that my existence was, I mean, early on, I'm the oldest of four boys. So when my mom and dad were just starting out, of course, I mean, I know that there wasn't a lot of money, but I would say overall, I grew up in a fairly comfortable middle class existence. But like Annalise, I was always fascinated with those individuals that I thought possessed glamour. When you're a Southern boy, like me, um, who had interests that certainly weren't typical for the regular Southern boy. Um, I was always looking for glamour, not really realizing until later that I really was surrounded by a sort of beauty all those years.
I agree. I think having been away from North Carolina for quite some time now, that when I return, I do see its beauty. Especially if I take a chance to slow down a little bit. If you're running from point A to point B, it's hard to see that sometimes. But there is a beauty to that that I think that some writers capture. And you're certainly one of those. If this is the debut novel, I can only imagine what all the rest of them will be like.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So it's funny because I was looking at a lot of different things and realizing the voices that I heard. I was impressed by, you gave Abel such a reverence for people. And I remember having grown up, lots of times the South is portrayed as being one class or another, one race or another, and that there's no getting along. I called everyone Mr. and Miss growing up. It didn't matter who they were. If they were 20 years older than I was, that was something my mother said, you have to put a handle on them, being a Mr. or Miss. And I picked up on that. I picked up on the fact that Miss Wessie, when Abel was talking to Eli, he would say, yes, sir. Those are respectful things that I do appreciate that you incorporated.
Thank you. I mean, I grew up similarly. My grandmothers, my mom, we always called everyone Miss or Mister. It was just a common courtesy. It's interesting. Times have changed so much. There's this awareness of this spectrum of gender and sexuality. So we have to be a little bit cautious these days. And it's a hard habit for me to break. I still want to call people Mr. and Miss. It's inherent. So it's hard to make that transition.
It is, and you bring up a very valid point. We were raised to be respectful of people who were older or people in a position. And I find myself constantly saying yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, ma'am, no, sir, whatever the occasion is. And then I have to sort of catch myself and say, how does this person want to be addressed? And I'm hoping that if I'm not familiar with you, that if I make a faux pas, it's forgiven. But I do try, because we do want to be inclusive.
We do, absolutely.
At least the two of us do anyway.
We do. We do. And I would never want to offend anyone on purpose. And I do hope that people will allow individuals opportunities to make mistakes.
Oh, I agree. Secrets is something that is all through the Cicada Tree. What would you say that you think the outcome of Secrets is?
So I guess I'll sort of lay the foundation. So for the Cicada Tree, I took a naturally occurring event, the cicada, and I created a mythology And there's this sense that with the cicada, as nymphs, they live under the earth for a very long time, and they're listening, and they're paying attention to what's going on above, and they're listening. They're eating secrets and they're eating lies, and they're just waiting for that moment where they can make their way to the surface and they can sing out those secrets and right wrongs. I think that secrets, of course, are a great source of conflict in a novel, in real life as well. Unfortunately, sometimes keeping secrets doesn't bode well in the end for individuals, but it makes for interesting reading.
It makes for really interesting reading. And it makes for interesting reading, in my estimation, because we all have had at least one secret in our life. Most of us
Yeah,
have had plenty, and we've also known the secrets of others.
exactly. When you're a young gay person growing up in rural South Georgia, I was a boy of the '70s and a teenager of the '80s. So that for me, I always felt like I was, carrying a big secret all those years. Things have changed quite a bit, of course,
Yes,
for the better for young people. But there is an element of lonesomeness and fear when you're keeping a secret that could upend your existence.
absolutely. And I find that having grown up in a small town or village, I like to refer to it as, um, the secrets of the village are known by some people. Um, some people don't know the truth. Some people know a lie that's been perpetrated, and they keep it as a secret. And some people keep it as a weapon. And of course, that is something that all good books that involve secrets, that becomes a weapon. And how we react to that weapon. That's something that we see quite a bit in the Cicada Tree, is that there are secrets. Some of them are just simply kept inside, and some are used for a weapon. It makes for great reading.
I agree. And I think that that's what I love most about the Southern Gothic or Southern fiction in general. That there's always, there's this perceived veneer, and beneath
Mm.
the veneer um, is where the truth lies.
And I will say for the listeners that, we Southerners are very, very fortunate that we celebrate our Gothicness, our Southernism. Whereas I think that the exact same things that we experience are experienced all over the world. It's just that we happen to write about it with such romanticism, and that's a good thing.
Agreed. I mean, there's Midwestern Gothic. So, you can find elements of the Gothic anywhere, but what makes Southern Gothic so unique is that it's just the very backdrop. The place is such a significant character in Southern fiction. It's just the sheer beauty of the place, and at times, the oppressiveness of the
Yes,
climate, which
yes.
lends itself to conflict and tension.
It does indeed. And it brings out the humanity of where we're from. The South gets a hard knock, and some of it the South has earned every hard knock it
Mhm.
gets. But there are so many wonderful people in the South who don't always participate in all of the horrible things. So it's nice to see in a book a great mix, because you bring humanity, and there's not only the right and the wrong, the positive and the negative. It is a telling of the entire group of people. So good job.
Thank you.
So besides all these wonderful accolades, you're a busy man in other ways as well, with the Easter Sills, and you're an editor. Is that right? Is it Blue Mountain Review?
Yes, so I was very fortunate to work with the Blue Mountain Review as their editor for a while. Because of the Cicada Tree schedule, and because I'm working to gear up to write another book, I did transition out of those duties and responsibilities. But it
Yeah.
was a wonderful, wonderful experience to be on the other end, to be the individual who actually is the gatekeeper and who has the opportunity to make publication decisions and selections.
Wonderful. So you are in the process of a second novel, or you finished a second novel?
I'm at the very beginning of a second novel, but I have a fully realized vision of what I want the book to be. And it will be Southern Gothic with elements of magical realism. It'll take place in 1931 on an isolated Georgia coastal barrier island I'm calling Good Hope, and it will be told in first person from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl named Leontine Sky.
I love it. I love it. It's nice to hear somebody be sure of what they got coming out. I love that. Do you have a website or social media you would like to share?
Yeah, so you can, if you would like to learn a little bit about me and also access my social media, Facebook and Instagram, you can do so by visiting robertlgwaltney.com.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. I have had such a great time, and I thank you so much for joining me, Robert. This has been wonderful. Once again, the book is called The Cicada Tree. I highly recommend it. It is so delicious.
Thank you, Dan.
And I look forward to the next novel too. So, chop, chop. Hang on for me just a minute. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us with Out with Dan. See you soon. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at Go Out with Dan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.